she loved me and she gave me my money back.
Okay, let me double check that my mic sounds pretty good. Okay, let me double check that mic sounds pretty good. Okay. Awesome. Welcome back, everybody. I'm making pajama pants today, and oh my gosh, it's I can't believe another month has gone by. I am actually pulling the fabric out of the dryer right now. Nothing like last minute. Okay. But this is a cool project, so I'm just going to lay the fabric out to let it rest here. And then I'm going to go over the pattern a little bit. And this is, I mean, if it was me by myself, without talking, without demonstrating, I'd probably have these done in about, I don't know, 35 minutes. It's going to take a lot longer talking it through. But so every month I'm teaching a class on sewing, and each month, generally speaking, the projects get a little harder. And this month, in April, for the first time, we're doing a woven pattern. So we've been sewing with knit patterns up until now. And woven fabrics generally don't stretch. Like if you think about knit fabrics, think about a stretchy t-shirt that you pull over your head, and a woven fabric, think about, I don't know, a blouse or a pair of non-stretch jeans. Okay. And which fabric is easier to sew with? That's actually kind of hard to say. I think wovens kind of behave in a more stable fashion, But with a woven fabric, you have to do something we're going to do today, which is you have to finish the edges. You have to, after you stitch the seam, you have to treat the seam a certain way so that it doesn't unravel. So anyway, here's my cool dinosaur print we're using today. Here we go. It's an like kind of a off-white background with some, I assume, Tyrannosaurus Rex creatures in 3 different colors saying raw. So that's what we're working with today. And then I'm going to show you how to make a drawstring as well. And for the drawstring, I'm using that pretty plaid there. And I don't know, just for fun. And I'll have some high definition photos of the finishes when we're done. But I got my coffee, I got my ginger tea, because you know what? This dries out my throat a lot to talk this much while I'm working. So let me make sure I've got everything going here. Okay. Sweet, sweet. Okay, so let's actually look at the pattern a little bit. Okay. So I printed this out, but I don't know where it went to. So we are using the 5 out of 4 pattern. Pajama pants is a free pattern. I still patterns out there, you guys, but this is like the pretty much the simplest woven fabric pattern I could think of. There wasn't like a pillowcase or something boring. Like these are cute little pants that we're making. So you'll see here on the left, that's an example. Actually, both examples have a drawstring. So the drawstring in this case doesn't take the place of elastic, it's in addition to the elastic. So for being a simple pattern, look at how many pages there are. There are like 24 pages. And here's the deal, like the more beginner based a pattern is, the more instructions. So that's why the pattern's so big. But it's almost like if you were stuck on a desert island with just you and your sewing machine and your fabric. It's trying to teach you everything. So there's your table of contents. Here's a picture of what we're making. I'm making the low-rise medium size for myself. The pattern recommends that you take your waist and your hip measurement, and if you're a woman, that you use the low-rise and use one size down. And so that's what I did, and it worked out pretty good. So they've got a couple different lengths, and we're using pockets. We're making pockets today. So it goes into how much fabric you need. So again, if I'm making the medium and I'm making the pants, that's 2 2/3 yards of fabric that is 44 inches wide. Okay, so if you have a wider fabric, like I made these in linen the other day, so I used less than 2 3/4. Other notions needed, you need some 1 1/4 inch waistband elastic. I'm just going to use 1 inch, that's totally fine. Then this is optional items, twill tape for drawstring. I'm going to make my drawstring today and show you guys how to do that. And also you can put like ribbon trim or ribbon for your hems, which is cute. Here's your size chart, so you should have already gone over this. So let's say that you had a waist of 32 inches and a hip of 37 inches. That would put you in a size medium at the waist and a size small at the hip. And these are kind of loose fitting, so if you're only one size difference in your waist and hip, you could probably just ignore it. But you could also grade down. We've talked about that. Grade down or grade up. And here's this is easy to confuse beginners. Like it's so informative and awesome, but if you're intimidated, this is going to be confusing. But I basically did exactly personal preference, but for guidance, I recommend regular rise for men, low rise for women. Okay, so I'm going to use low rise. Slimmer fit, go down 1 size. I recommend this option for women. So that's exactly what I did. I used the low rise, 1 size smaller than my size. And you know what? It worked out great, actually. I don't like super baggy pajamas. These are definitely relaxed fit. And so this is kind of cool. This is the finished measurement of the pajamas. So if you have a pair of pajamas that fit just right, you can kind of compare to get an idea of what size you want to be in. And seam allowances are 3/8 of an inch. Okay, that's here. Now this is all about how to print the pattern, which you've already done because you did your homework. And this is a depiction of if you printed out at home all of these little sheets and you taped it together, and you've got your sizes there. So we're skipping all of this. I'm going to talk a little bit about the shape of the leg. So for simple pull-on pants like this, the front pant is usually sort of smaller and the back pant is bigger. The idea is that your butt is bigger than your front, but also that you want that ease of movement in the back. I can't imagine anyone would want a pair of super snug fitting pajamas to sleep in. And this is a cool bit of shaping at the waist. It's a little different actually. It's pretty interesting. And then we've got our little pocket piece. I always call that like a kidney shaped piece. So this talks about shortening and lengthening. Typically when you shorten and lengthen a garment, you don't do it at the very bottom or the top of the shirt or the pant leg or the sleeve. You do it kind of in the middle. I'm going to recommend that unless you know that you're tall, go ahead and make this size. And if you think you might be short, don't worry about it. And we're going to cheat and take the length off the bottom. Don't tell anybody. But this is telling you the proper way to do it. Okay, so let's see. One piece pant leg. So this is saying, this is pretty interesting. Okay. The outseam of the pant is perfectly straight. And what that tells me instantly is that it means that it's kind of a baggy fit. Okay. That's just something I know from experience. And so you could technically just tape the front and the back leg together and you wouldn't have this seam. But what happens if you do that? Well, then you don't get your inseam pockets. So I want pockets, so I'm not going to take that option. Now this is showing you how to lay it out. I'm just going to do it on the fly like I do every single time. Oh, and here's your elastic and your drawstring. And I am going to write this down, and we are going to do this, okay? So, let me get my little pen. Let me make sure no one's asked a question yet. I think most people are taking this class later. So I don't think I have questions, but I have to kind of double check, okay? All right, sweet. Okay, so let's talk about this for a second. So elastic length, the pattern says, look, these are suggestions. You might, it says to find your length, if you're making the low rise, measure your high hip 2 inches below your navel. And subtract an inch or 2 inches. So I'm actually just going to do that right this second. I'm just going to take that measurement. So in other words, you're right below your belly button. Take that measurement, write it down, and then subtract 2 inches. So I'm going to write that number down, and that's my elastic. And I'm actually going to cut that right now. So, and what elastic am I using today? I'll use this, I kind of want to use white elastic because I'm in a white garment here. You should see this giant ass pile of elastic that I have. Here's another, here's a secret trick too. So here I am with my elastic. I'm gonna be naughty and look at this. I have these smaller chunks, and you can actually make your elastic. You can butt these together by the method I showed you in February's tutorial. And you could use several pieces. If you're like me and you're super frugal and you like to save your elastic, and you don't want to throw any out, it'll work just fine. But I am going to, all right, here's my elastic that I'm going to use. Let's put this one away. You might notice, you probably don't, but I will tell you that that is much more narrow than the 1 1/4 inch, and that's okay. If you're a beginner, I recommend using exactly what the pattern tells you to. But I will also tell you what I think I mentioned last month when we made our bralette, that elastic, you can basically substitute different widths of elastic pretty casually, if you don't have to worry about it too much. Okay, so that's my elastic, okay? And the next thing, whoops. When I have 2 keyboards, predictably I make mistakes. Okay, so drawstring, okay? So the drawstring, I noticed, there's so many ways. You can have a drawstring that's actually attached to the elastic. Hi, Aldo. You can have the elastic actually slide in and be stitched to the drawstring, or like the drawstring is half of the waist and the elastic's in the back. But what this looks like to me is where the drawstring is going to go all the way through the waistband. So let me find that waistband and show you what I mean. So there's going to be elastic in here. That's the length we just cut. And then we're going to have made 2 buttonholes. We're going to thread the drawstring in there as well. So you have both. And so that means, essentially, you're going to take that same measurement that you just took right below your little belly button, and you're going to add 24 inches. So let me do that now. Let's see. Okay, so I'm actually making a drawstring. Look at that, it tells you how. If you've not already cut your drawstring, go ahead and cut it. It's telling you how to do it. What the heck? Oh, it's telling you how to sew the end of the drawstring. That's funny. I'm going to be making mine. Actually, I'll just make it right away, like first thing. So I'm going to make a drawstring that is 60 inches long. Whoops, I'm too far. There you go. And I'm just going to, you guys will like this. I'm actually going to take my little plaid and since I'm going to tear it to get like a perfect edge here. This isn't quite wide enough to make my hip measurement plus 24 inches, so I'm going to tear 2 strips, okay? And they need to be at least 1 inch. And this is so cool, you guys. So let's see if you can. So not all fabric tears on the cross grain well, but this fabric does. This is such an awesome exact way to get the right width. Look at this. I'm going to turn this little bit here, but I want my plaids to match because I'm a fool. So I've got my 2 strips. Okay. I don't know. These look like about 1 1/4 inches. It's going to be kind of a thicker drawstring. Got my 2 strips. I'm actually going to press them real quick because the action of tearing just distorts the grain a tiny bit. So I'm over here at my iron. So if you have a fabric you can't tear, or I mean it's going to be very obvious when you try to tear a fabric on the cross grain, it'll either go pretty smoothly or it won't budge. Generally, you can only do this with wovens. So if you are trying to make a knit drawstring, don't even bother doing what I just did. But if you can tear it, it's going to be obvious when you start. If you can't, you just want to find the grain, fold your fabric in half and use your ruler and carefully cut out between, 1 inch to, at the widest, maybe 1.5 inch strip. And we're going to be making a big long drawstring out of this. That's the first thing we're doing before we're even cutting out our major pieces. Okay. And if you're not a drawstring person, if you're not doing a drawstring, then you just got to sit tight. My fabric is not even all the way dry. That's pretty funny. Okay. Okay, let's see. There we go. So, here is the short end of one of our strips, and I'm going to butt it together with another short end. I'm going to put my needle in the needle down position, which is how I do most of my sewing. And I'm just going to, by the way, this seam here isn't a very big deal because it's basically going to be in the center. It's hidden. This seam will never see the light of day. But I want it to be pretty firm. So I just flipped it around and did a double stitch. Bring up one of my okay, so that's, and now I'm gonna go ahead and press that open, that seam. And I'm going to fold the drawstring in half the lengthwise way, and I'm going to stitch. This is kind of a long stitch. Okay. You want to make sure that you fold it right sides together. Okay. So I'm going to use the edge of my foot right here. And you want to have a really nice firm back stitch at the beginning of this, because it's going to, when you turn this strap the right way, it's gonna pull on that beginning and end of your long stitch. So you really want to do a nice back stitch. Fairly short stitch length. I've got 2 millimeters here. And then we're gonna be here a minute. There are tools that we can use to turn a long tube like this. Oh, and you know what's funny? I could have cut this. It's really long, so I could have cut this a lot earlier. But I'm going to use the whole thing, and that way, when I thread it through, I can cut the drawstring exactly the length I want. Okay, I'm almost at the halfway point. And you know, it sucks when you make a drawstring and you don't have a tight enough stitch, and so when you pull the drawstring right side out, you'll hear like stitches pop or it'll come unraveled. So of course I've learned that the hard way. Okay. Hello, Joanne. So let's just talk really briefly about seam finishing. So you'll notice that there's all of this, like all these threads. This comes from me tearing it on the cross grain. And you know, like I mentioned, not all fabrics tear evenly and well, but a lot of wovens do. And some of them will shed a lot after you do that, and some hardly at all. But when you're sewing all of the seams of your little garment, the fabric is going to ravel and all these threads are going to come out, and they'll certainly come out while you're wearing it, but even worse, they'll come out when you wash the garment and make horrible knots. And that's generally why we finish the edges in our garments, or you cover them all with a lining. So by the end of the year, we'll be doing a lining together. But right now, this is an unlined, real simple pair of pajama pants. And there's a million ways you can finish the seams. I'm going to use my serger to finish the seams, but I'm also going to show you how to do it if you don't have a serger. There's several different ways. So I'm coming to the other end here. So again, you want to really back stitch really firmly there. Okay. I should have checked my tension. Yeah, it looks good. Okay. So this is kind of, this is a long tube. All right, and there's a million ways that you can turn it. You can use a long turning tool, but I'm actually going to use this bobby pin that was in my hair. This is one of my favorite turning tools. So you're just going to take this tiny little snip, about 1/8 of an inch at the end of your tube inside out. See that? And you slide the bobby pin in so that one leg is all the way inside the tube. It's hard to see, isn't it? And the other leg is barely peeping out. So you should only see about 1/4 inch of your whole bobby pin. So one leg's all the way in, and the other leg comes in through the notch, so you only see this tiny bit. And getting it started takes a little wiggling. I'm actually going to trim this seam allowance down just to help me get started. And depending on how narrow, depending on if you're using like a thick linen and you were foolish and cut like a really skinny strip, you're going to just suffer through the next few minutes. So now I'm trying to do this while like keeping my hands on view, holding this awkward angle. Ew. This is where it's nice to have a kid in the sewing room with you, because you can hand him. Once you get the tube started, great. This is just a fabric that doesn't want to go. And you'll find out if you cut that notch too close to the end, because it'll just pull right off. You'll have to back up and start over. Oh my gosh. There we go. Okay. You'll start to feel it when it comes through. But you push the bobby pin in, and this tends to kind of fray the seam allowance of the tube. And yeah, we're just gonna hang out here for a while I do this. Funnily, like I would have thought this would slide so much nicer than it is, but it's just not. It's not in the mood. Man, we've already been spending 23 minutes in this stream. So we just keep feeding it through. And, you know, obviously you've got to use a little force to do this, but don't use too much because you'll hear this dreaded popping sound, which means you've got a split seam. And sometimes that means you gotta like go back in there and re-stitch it. Or be lazy and don't and have a drawstring that's not quite. So we're almost to the halfway mark here. Man, today would be a nice day for me to have a camera on my pressing board. See how that's just going super fast now. So the end can get kind of bunched up, so make sure that you're not neglecting the end while you do this. And it's always kind of cool when you get to when the first end comes out at the end of the tube, because then you can pull a little bit easier. So if you notice, the pattern had said you can use like twill tape or like a pre-made drawstring. Now you see why, right? It takes a minute. This drawstring is super long. Like I said, I didn't trim it before I started sewing it, which I should have. But I'll just use those ends. I use everything. These little ends I'll be using them for other projects for sure. Okay, and we've reached whoops, I'm going backwards. We've passed the halfway mark now. What? Sort of not wanting to, there we go. If the more seams that are in this tube, the more it can get caught on itself. But we had to have a seam because we just did not have. You could make two shorter drawstrings and stitch them together in the middle. I've never done that though. But if you think about it, I mean, the center of the drawstring is going to stay hidden in your hood or your waistband. Like, no one's ever going to see it. It doesn't have to be perfect. And usually I kind of do things in order, but I feel like this pattern assumed, you wouldn't be making a drawstring, you would have purchased one. Okay, we're getting there. By the way, if you have a serger, I mean, you could just like serge a much skinnier strip, wrong sides together, and I've made that kind of a drawstring. It looks a little more kind of funky and, I don't know, like just not distressed, but has a deconstructed type of look. Okay, we're getting there. Oh, look, my little there we go. All right. Okay, hang on. Houston, we have had a problem. Okay, there we go. Okay, see, that's where it comes out the end. Okay, once that happens, you can put the bobby pin back in your hair and just gently pull the whole thing. And then, it looks kind of nasty after you pull it, but we're going to flatten it and steam it to death over there on the ironing board. So you can make a very thin strap, like a spaghetti strap. If you want to do something super thin, because I'm just talking, because we're just doing this tedious thing together. Oh, it's a little caught up on the center, which is like a thing that happens. So to make a really thin strap, and this is kind of, I would call like an intermediate technique, not a beginner. You cut your strip on the bias instead, and you stretch it just slightly while you sew, and sew it like, you can sew it like 1/8 of an inch and make this tiny 1/8 of an inch strap that's super strong, and then you steam the heck out of it. Okay, it's just not liking going over the middle seam. I finally got it. That's why we trim that middle seam down. This is the longest drawstring I've ever done. Pretty funny. I'm yanking pretty hard. I'm just gonna do a pop on camera. You guys are gonna go like, oh. Oh my gosh, finally. Okay, so see how rumply that looks? So you can just press it if you like, but what I'm gonna do is stab it with a T-pin. So that's one of these guys here. I'm gonna stab it to my ironing board super firmly, and I'm gonna stretch it super flat and steam the heck out of it and leave it there to fully cool off. And that makes just this awesome flat. It's, see that look, that's gonna look really good. I'm gonna take my 2 T-pins here. Okay. And just reef them into my ironing board. And while that's drying, we'll go ahead and cut out the other pieces. Oh my goodness. So this is the kind of thing, like, it's kind of exacting, like, who cares, it's just a drawstring, but it will make it look better. It kind of separates your sewing from looking, you know, homemade, but also it's going to look better than a retail, like, garment. That's the goal. So I'm over here scorching myself on my iron. Yeah. All right, that's looking really great. It looks like a long, stripy snake. Okay, let me get it a tiny bit more established. It's longer than my ironing board, that's funny. I wonder it took so long. All right. So now, let's get to cutting the actual, there we go. Okay. Great, okay. So let's talk about the shapes here. This is the pocket shape. We're going to need 4 of those. I'm going to put that aside for a moment. This is the back of the pattern. Okay. This is the back crotch curve. This is like where your butt is. these are the little pocket marks that we're going to be using. It's really simple. That's kind of it. And this is the front. Okay. You'll notice the front's much smaller. For a pair of pull-on pants, that's how that goes. Okay, let me make sure I'm not skipping anything important. Okay, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to start with the big piece first. And you notice I was fiddling around quite a bit and straightening the grain out. We've talked about the grain multiple times. Oh, it's just so barely not big enough. But I'm going to cheat because I'll tell you why. Because, no, it is big enough. Sorry. I don't know where I was getting that. Okay. Yeah, we've got some room. All right. And while I'm here, so you can see most of the piece that way. While I'm here, I'm going to mess with these pocket pieces. I'm going to cut 2 of them out because it'll fit fairly. Yeah, nice. I have a brand new sharp blade. Here, woo! There we go. This. Whoops. Come on over here. Use my ruler. And again, you remember I said that this side seam is perfectly straight, so it's on the straight of grain, so we can just bring it real close. Make sure that we've got total coverage here. And then, it's funny, the pocket piece doesn't have a grain mark on it. But because it's on this totally straight side seam, that kind of means that this is the grain right here. Does it matter a lot which, if the pocket piece is on grain? It doesn't, but it matters enough. So I'm going to go ahead and cut out 2 of my pockets. So I'm just going to talk about rotary cutting. You notice, I mean, do you notice how fast this is? Because I'm not using any pattern weights. I'm not pinning. This is like, if you're new, you probably want to do a little pinning. You want to be really careful. You want to go slow. We've talked about the bulk of the piece that you have is going to be on your left, and your cutting, well, I'm sorry, your non-dominant hand is going to touch that, and then your dominant hand is going to be touching the blade, and you're going to hold it properly. So for this kind of blade, I put my finger here on the ridges. I also sheath the blade every time I'm not using it. So I've got 2 of my pockets done, and then I'll cut this back. And while I'm here, I'm going to mark my pocket locations. Oh, I have to tell you, put a new blade on your rotary cutter often. You know, you could always track this and make some back pockets on this. It would be totally adorable. Okay, so I'm almost done. I have this one long seam, and then I want to mark my pocket location. So, you know, the whole idea of sort of taping the pattern together, so that you don't have a side seam. Besides the fact that you would be essentially sacrificing your inseam pockets, this fabric isn't wide enough to do that. It's you couldn't do it. It's only 44 inches wide. Okay, so here are my pocket locations. And do you remember we said we had 3/8 of an inch? So to me, I'm gonna be a good seamstress, and I'm gonna mark with a pen instead of snips. Because some of y'all, I tell you, snip 1/8 of an inch in, and you snip like 1/2 of an inch in. So I'm just marking those exact locations right here. Okay. Look at that. We've got our back cut out. We've got half of our pocket pieces cut out. I'm just whipping through this. Okay, so now pull this little homie back. Aren't these like cute little dinosaurs? I don't know. Yes, they are. Flannel is tricky. Flannel can look so good on the bolt, and then when you wash it and dry it, it looks like crap. It shrinks a lot. It'll shrink even after your first initial wash. Okay, so same deal. These dinosaurs, I should have mentioned, there isn't an up or a down. So I don't have to worry about which direction. There's no nap, nothing like that. Alright, so now, before I cut out the... Here, let me scrooch it so it's more centered for you guys. There you go. So, you know, take your time. Take your time getting that grain nice and straight. Now, I'm just a tiny bit shorter than this medium size. And do you remember I had said, don't worry about it, we'll take the bottom off like here instead of the proper lengthening and shortening. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to cut my, once again, line up my grain with my pocket piece. It's so funny. I don't feel like I walk around putting a lot of stuff in my pajama pockets, but I will say that having pajamas without pockets really sucks. It doesn't feel good. I just feel like I like the feeling of pockets, even though I don't use them all that much. And I don't think I'm alone in that at all. Okay, so I've got my 4 pocket pieces now. That's all I need. So we're almost all done cutting out all of these pieces. The process that we're going through today is almost identical for like men's pajamas, little kids' pajamas. By the way, baby pajamas, like this kind of kite shape is it's less obvious, which is like the crotch curve, and it's like you can actually sew your baby pants together in a multitude of incorrect ways. All right, there we go. So I'm just gonna trim this off. So I've got my substantial. I could probably make another pair of these, maybe. Whoops. And the other thing that's good to know is, you know, leave your pattern pieces as undisturbed and flat as possible. And if you have lots of pieces and you're confusing, they're confusing to you, then go ahead and, you know, pin the actual pattern piece like you're supposed to. It's very obvious what the front, the back, and the pocket is for this. So, okay. One more thing we're gonna do, and that's mark our pockets, okay? I'm doing the same thing, using a little pen instead of a snip. All right. Now, let's look at the actual pattern says to do next. Actually, let's take a bathroom break first. I'll be right back. All right. So now, here we go. So basically now it's, these are super simple. Traditionally, thank you, Fee. Traditionally, so now we gotta start thinking about seam finishes. Traditionally, we finish the straight edge of the pocket and that little section of the side seam, and then we stitch pockets together, and then we finish all around the pant leg and the pocket, and that's totally fine. So I'm not going to do that today, but it tells you how to do that, and I think everyone here today kind of knows how to finish a seam edge, but I am going to bring you into my serger land. Thank you, Phoenix. And first I'm going to just kind of do like the tradition and finish for the love of Pete. See, look, that's gonna look really nice. I'm just gonna do all 4 straight seam allowances on the pocket. So I'm definitely departing from how the pattern says to do it, but try not to worry about it. Whoops, that's the wrong edge. But that's okay, you know why? Because the next step in my world is to actually go ahead and go around the edges of the pockets too. So at the very end of this process, you'll have the entire, all 4 pockets, with the exception of this like little top spot, okay? And don't worry about that. Don't worry about this little bit and then this little cutaway here, okay? we're definitely doing a very high-end finish, but not an absolutely meticulously perfect one because these are pajama pants. So I'm going to go ahead and go around. I actually really enjoy like serging a curve because what a great practice for accuracy. So you'll notice, I mean, this is just like this tiny, I'm not really cutting anything. And see, I like this camera, I love it. Okay. I think one of the things that used to frustrate me when I was first learning to sew was the order of operations of finishing seams. I really wanted patterns that were super exact about that. And the best pattern company I've so far come across that gives you absolutely perfect instructions for how to clean finish your seams is Sew House 7 out of Portland. So if you really want to get that really good looking end result on the inside of your garment, I recommend sewing some of her patterns. But what you'll find over time is that you don't have to worry about it that much. Okay, so now I'm going to finish. Let's see. Now, so I'm not doing quite what they're doing. I've just finished all of the seams around the pocket, all 4 pocket pieces. Now I'm just going to finish the out seam, and I'm actually going to finish the waist seam. So the inseam and the crotch seams on the fronts and backs, I'm not going to finish yet. But on the 4 remaining pieces, the 2 backs and the 2 fronts, I'm going to finish the out seam and the waist seam. Okay, so just more serging for y'all. If you don't have a serger, you can actually follow the instructions just like the pattern, or you can do what I'm doing, but instead of serging, you actually stitch like a 1/4 inch in and then pink the edges. You could even make, see, I was talking and I did the wrong seam. You could even make a French seam for some of these, but I'm not interested in that. I was just thinking, I've got to pop these on to get my length. And I do want to one day have lights and a fitting room camera, but for today, I'm probably just going to stand on my table to show you. Okay, so okay, that's one of those 4 pieces done. That was, I think, those are the backs. So again, doing the out seam. This is kind of a cool project. These pajamas, it covers a lot of basics, and you end up with something cool. I've taught my share of beginners how to make like pillowcases, and they're fun, but this is more fun. Okay. So now I'm doing the top waistband seam. Just, leave your tails, doesn't matter. And now I'm going to bring my top over, my front. And same exact thing, out seams and the waistband. The directions that the pattern gives you are just fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with them. This is just my preference after years of messing around with this kind of stuff. Alright, there's my fronts. I'm going to check my fronts behind me on the cutting table because I'm going to use that to pin the pockets to show you guys the next step. So here's my last out seam and my last waistband seam. This serger is awesome. It's like a 70s serger. It's old. Someone gave it to me, and it just hums along and works, and nothing ever goes wrong with it. I say that, and then something terrible will happen. Okay. There we go. All right, so I'm going to bring over my pins, and for all 4 pieces, the 2 fronts and the 2 backs, I'm going to pin my pocket exactly like the directions show you. So obviously the round part of the pocket faces down toward the bottom of the leg. Okay. And right sides together. Okay. One reason I chose this fabric, it's just so obvious what the right sides are and what the right sides aren't. So got my little markings here, my pocket markings, and I'm just gonna match it all up. Perfect. 2, maybe 3 pins, not a big deal. Okay, so there's my first pocket. I gotta do all 4. So that's my front. Here's another front. And again, I really am not paying much attention to these tails up here for now, these serger tails. Just pinning right to my markings. And it should be kind of obvious, but like, let's say that you weren't exact in your cutting or marking. Just make sure that this top edge from the raw waistband to the top of the pocket is, you know, the same distance for both your fronts and backs. So now I'm going to bring my backs over here, my pants backs. Same thing. Right sides together. Okay. Right, that's 3. And here's number 4. I'm sad. I was supposed to be on at noon today, and I had several client reschedules today, so I had to push back my time, but I think I had a couple girlfriends that were ready at noon, or maybe thinking about being ready at noon. Okay. Okay, here we go. We can probably bring our stitch a little bit up, like 2.5. So this is I don't know, weirdly satisfying. So again, this is a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So for the pocket though, I'm just going to make it just a little bit shy of that when I stitch the pockets to the right sides of the pant legs. So I'm going to do an 1/8 of an inch, or sorry, 1/4 inch, and do a nice little back stitch there, and then lining up those edges. All right, we're just going to do all 4 of them. I have to go check to make sure I'm not doing anything totally different than the pattern. One reason you make the pocket seem just a tiny bit inside the seam allowance is so that the pocket is really hidden. Like when you're standing there, no one can see that there are pockets. And the next step we do is going to ensure that as well. Okay, 2 out of 4. And it's kind of a joy to make something so simple. And, you know, that definitely is going to look great, and it'll look great when it's turned inside out, which is kind of one of my hallmarks of construction. But that is kind of pretty easy breezy too. Okay, last one. Now we'll just take each one of those seams that we just made. Okay, so go ahead and cut those. If you sort of chain stitched like I did from one piece to the next, cut those threads out. And go ahead and like put your 4 pieces on your lap. And this next step is pretty easy. We are going to, wait, let me go check my instructions. Yeah. Let's see, sew pockets of pants. Okay, so the pattern doesn't have you doing this, okay? The pattern has you now just sewing those side seams together, including the pocket, but we're going to do one more thing in between, okay? We are going to turn our pockets, fold them out to they're like wings. Okay, here's my pant leg here, and pull my pocket out, and we're going to stitch. This is called understitching. And we're basically stitching the pocket and the both seam allowances all to itself, about 1/8 of an inch away from the seam line. And this will help the pockets not try to turn inside out, and it will help them lay really nice. And for inseam pockets, I can't imagine not doing this. There are sort of boutique ways you can do it. You could hand, like, prick stitch it, but see, look, there it is. You can barely see that seam there. It makes it lie nice and flat. Okay, so we're going to do that with all 4. So again, you take your pant leg and you flip out your pocket to where it's like a wing, and you really press that you kind of pull the seam apart, and you don't actually need to even backstitch here, because the next line of stitching we do will catch all of those layers. So it's not a very big deal. So I've got two done now. This is gonna look good. And if you're good, you'll take these. So look, that's the back side. That's the inside of the pajama pants. Look at how nice that looks. There's no fraying threads anywhere. Okay. So if you're good, you'll press that what you just sewed. I guess I'll do that. Okay, here's my third. Okay, and my last one. So understitching almost always means that you're stitching both seam allowances to a lining or a pocket or a facing. And it's one of those techniques that kind of separates the girls from the women. It really makes a difference. Okay, so let me show you what I just did on my big camera. So we really what step are we on here? We're on figure 1B, figure 2, and we've just done this extra bit of understitching here to make it look nice. And then you should take it, I'm gonna do it, take all 4 pieces to the ironing board and just press that seam. And if you like, you can press if you like warped your pocket here while you were serging or stitching it, go ahead and press that too. I'm gonna take all that stuff over. And here I am, pressing away. Man, this makes me, when my kids were little, I made them so many clothes. I haven't met anyone who made more clothes for their kids. Or not personally met. I made a lot. And one thing I made a lot of were little flannel pajama pants. And now my kids are taller than me. So like, I'd probably make them each a size small and then lengthen them. Okay, so now we're gonna stitch our side seams together. Okay, so take a front and a back, and it will be very obvious which ones match. So here's one of my fronts. Okay, and so I'm gonna take a back that matches. Did I look out? Yeah. So pockets should match. Crotch seams should be facing each other. This is the front crotch seam, the back. And one should be noticeably larger than the other. Don't sew 2 fronts together or 2 backs together. Or go ahead, because it's like a rite of passage and we all do it. So I'm just going to, like on that figure 1B, just pinning all this whole seam, including the pockets. I'm going to go ahead and do it for both the front and left leg, or the right and left leg. Nice. And like, it's all lining up. The top waistband edge is lining up. The pockets are lining up. Nice, yeah. Yeah, everything's lining up. I reserve the right in these lessons to have it go wrong and get all screwed up because I'm human, and demonstrating while going at a fair clip and talking about everything I need to talk about is not super easy. And you guys know what? We're gonna do a little cheater method here. I've pinned the out seams together, including the pockets. And we're just gonna go ahead while we're here and pin the inseams together. So the back leg is way fuller than the front. So just don't even, who cares? Line up those two inseams, okay? See, those are my two inseams. And we're going to go ahead and pin those as well. And everything should be lining up. And if it's not, you cut incorrectly. And what this means is like this edge is right on the cross grain. Outseam and inseam are equal. There's no weird ripples or anything like that, so that these will hang properly. My husband tells a story about a pair of pants, a homemade pants he had, where the inseam was always twisting around his leg. And that's what happens if you don't cut it properly on the grain or you don't cut your pattern piece. Okay, so I have my outseam and my inseam pinned. I'm taking that to the machine, and then I'm going to really quickly pin the other one. So this time I'll put the pants back down first. So again, you want to make sure that you're not pinning two backs and two fronts together, or else you'll have to take that seam back out. And I mean, if it isn't obvious by now, if you're a beginner, it's so smart to use fabrics that have an obvious front and a back side, because if you don't, you can end up accidentally making like two left sides of a garment. You can sew stuff together somehow upside down. Like, there's just no limit to the ways you can screw it up. So you'll see that the front here is smaller than the back piece. And you really want to put a pin right in that intersection of the pocket. You want that to be a pretty strongly stitched part. All right, so I've got my outseam, well, a couple more pins in the pocket. I love how well, when you cut it accurately, everything comes together so nicely. And then the whole benefit is, yes, it looks good. You turn the pants inside out and it looks amazing. I mean, go ahead and check out your Gap pajama pants, your Old Navy or Land's End, and you're not going to find such a nice finish on the inside. But it's not just that it looks good, it's that it will last, they will last longer when there's a lot of care taken into the seam finishes. So if you've been counting, you'll see that there's 4 seams that I'm going to get to stitch. Inseams and out seams for both the left and the right leg. And like, I don't know, we're like 65% of the way done through this project. Okay. All right. Tim, I'm glad you're here. I don't know if you're still here, but Tim, I would never reveal Avengers Endgame spoilers, but Tim is going to see the movie tomorrow. And I think, no, tonight. Aren't you seeing it tonight? Ralph wants me to go see it with him tomorrow. I love Ralph very much, so that's going to happen. The kids are like, no. All right, so this is where all of those little tails, go ahead and just pull them out so that they don't get caught in the seam. And I'm stitching from the top waist, and I'm going to stitch just right to the intersection where the pocket is pinned. And leave the needle down, and then go ahead and just swivel. Oh, it looks so great. And I actually, like a dork, instead of stitching, because again, my method, instead of stitching that 3/8 of an inch, I actually angle over and then catch, with either a zigzag or straight stitch, catch those two serged edges to make this just so nice and flat. Yeah, let's go ahead and do a zigzag. So this is just going to make a nice, flat, amazing pocket. And then just, you know, gently, like, make sure your curves match as you go around. And if at this stage your curves aren't matching, I would depart from my little perfectionist method here and just make sure that the pockets are going to be flat. So you don't, if your edges aren't going to match up because you weren't able to achieve that perfection in cutting, or because you roughed these up a little bit while you were finishing the seams, then don't worry about it. Just stitch a nice normal seam allowance. Then you can, with these little edges here, you can thread them back in, or you can clip them. I went ahead and clipped mine. So we're about to come up here into the bottom of the pocket again. And the goal again is to just get it right there at that intersection. And another thing is, sometimes that seam allowance wants to flip back when you approach it from the pocket side. And so sometimes I'll just sew, yeah, see, it tried to flip, which I don't care. But if you do care, you can actually sew from the top waist seam and end your stitch right in the middle of that pocket, and then sew it from the bottom hem on the other side, flip it over. And that makes sure that you don't have that problem. Okay, so here I go, finishing up this out seam. I'm going to do both out seams, and I'm going to do both in seams. Okay. So here I go. Second out seam. Okay. Same thing, 3/8 of an inch. One cool thing about this method, where I finish the out seams first, is I can press the out seams open, which I think looks really nice. And then at some point towards the pocket, you kind of abandon pressing it. You can clip it right near the pocket if you want to press it open all the way up. All right. And I'm really excited because pretty soon here we're going to be making some buttonholes. And I'm just going to show you like a cheater method. It's not a method that would be appropriate for like buttonholes in a shirt because it will look homemade, but it is absolutely appropriate for pajamas. and it will sort of show you the principles of a buttonhole. Right. So again, when I get to that pocket, I really want to get my needle right there in that intersection. And swivel it. And go ahead and stitch down to the curve, and then I'm, in my case, going to switch to a zigzag. For some reason I had a super wide zigzag in there. I don't think you guys can hear my music today. Just my voice. I can hear music. Okay, so now about to the top of that. Go ahead and swivel and continue on to the top of the waistband area. And now, so I've got my two out seams done. Now I'm going to sew my inseams. And in this case, we're doing it more traditionally. We're actually sewing the inseam and then finishing the seam. Now, also, this is a good point. Before you do the inseam, if you want to press open your side seam, you can on the ironing board. I'm going to go ahead and press it after I've sewn both, like, essentially leg tubes together. And then I'm going to duck on over and see when the pattern wants us to be putting our buttonholes in. Okay, one inseam all finished, and the next one. Next month we're going back to knits, and we're making a t-shirt, which is pretty fun. I've picked the easiest t-shirt pattern I could find that has a good size range. I am kind of obsessed with finding the perfect t-shirt fit, and t-shirt fit really varies with the fabric that you're using. Like if you have 100% cotton that doesn't really stretch and snap back, doesn't have recovery, and it doesn't drape, you're gonna maybe want a totally different fit than like a rayon, a super springy, like drapey rayon knit. And so I've been kind of exploring like all these different fits and occasionally buying some retail shirts and seeing what they have to offer, which is never gonna compare to something you make yourself. Okay, so I have finished. Yeah, okay. So let's see where we are on this pattern. So I finished my out seams and I went straight to the inseams here. This pattern has it tells you can top stitch your pocket to the front, but I have found that with this little understitching that we did, the pocket doesn't really flip out and it doesn't flip forward. So this is, if you like, you can top stitch the whole leg. That's what this shows. I don't like that. Top stitching is wonderful, but it also, I think it has a less formal look, and even though these are dinosaur pajamas, I want to have the non-top stitched look. Oh, and top stitching gets swallowed up when you have a complicated print like this. Like you wouldn't even see it. But if you're sewing with a solid and you have a nice heavy top stitch, that like might look really good. So I'm here on step 5. I've already done this. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and serge finish that, and then I'm going to press these 2 seams. Okay, so I've not done it in exactly the style of the pattern. So here I go. Here's an inseam. And here's my second inseam. Okay. We're getting there, guys. Okay. Now I'm coming over to my board. Whoops, oh no. What the heck? It's some kind of weird button. Now I can't find my page. We're crying out loud. There we are. Okay, jeez. All right. So here's my legs, and they're both put together, a right and a left. If you have any doubts about that, go ahead and lay it together and make sure that you have a mirror image scene happening here. So my front pieces are on top. They're smaller than the back. So I'm going to go ahead and press the inseam towards the back of the pajama pants, and I'm actually just going to press the outseam open. Okay, take me a second. My drawstring is over here. It's all stretched out and seamed out. Looks good. And by far my favorite pajama pattern fabric is cotton. It's easier to work with than rayon. So look, here is my drawstring. Yeah, cotton is easy to work with, and it's soft, and it lasts a long time. But the picture I posted a few days ago of the green fabric, that was linen. Okay, so I'm just giving this a quick press. Pressing these outseams open. Takes a minute. Okay, I've got one done. And yeah, if you were going to top stitch that outseam, you would definitely want to do that before you sew your inseam. You would want to do it like the instructions indicate. But I will tell you, like, I love top stitching, but on this pattern, it would just disappear. You would not see it. And I've learned that. Like, I've made so many garments where I did some kind of clever top stitching, but because I had used a pretty cool novelty print, you couldn't really see it. It does add structure and strength to the garment though. I'm actually about to make myself a pair of tweed trousers, and they have like a window pane check, and I'm like, okay, am I gonna use a pretty contrasting top stitch or one that kind of fades in? Okay, I've got those done. This is a cool part of pants next here. I had someone complaining because I wasn't on top of the comments, so let me just double check those real quick. Okay. Okay, good. Nobody here. Nobody cares. Okay, so this is the cool part of pull-on pants. You actually just, it's so simple. You turn one pant leg right side out, and you've got one pant leg inside out, and you just slide, like take the hem of the right side out pant leg and just slide it down to the hem of the inside out one, and that will line up these two crotch curves as long as you have sewn everything together properly until then. So now I'm going to pin my crotch curves, and I'm going to stitch that big old butt up through the front crotch, and then I'm going to use my serger to finish that. This is not a bad seam to like double stitch, like stitch one line and then stitch another, because this, you know, takes some strain, especially if you're doing high kicks in your PJs. Since I am stitching and serging, I'm not going to bother with double stitching. Oh gosh, sorry guys. Okay, here I go. Just making sure that the crotch is going to line up really well. Sometimes I like to kind of backstitch, like reinforce that crotch a little bit. I've never had a crotch split on me, but it's not just the strength of the fabric, it's how well the garment fits. If the garment doesn't fit properly elsewhere or in the crotch, it's more likely to split. Okay. All right, awesome. So I've got my crotch seam done. So I'm just going to go ahead and serge that, and then I think we're on to our buttonhole at that point. Let me double check over here. Yes. Okay. All right, here I am, serging away. Hello, Jessica. All right. Yeah, we are probably like, I don't know, 80% of the way through this project. All right. So I now have my pants completed. And they just need the waistband treatment and the hem treatment. The pockets are done. They aren't going to look quite right because they're going to look really wide because they're not gathered at the waist yet. Okay. So I actually am drinking a lot and have to go use the bathroom. I will be back. Okay, I'm back. Excuse the crunching. Okay. All right, waistbands. Two options. Attached elastic or the casing. We are doing a casing. And we're also doing the drawstring. So here, I'm going to take these little chunks of interfacing and iron them about an inch from that center crotch seam and about 1 3/4 inch from the top. And it's also telling us to sew the buttonholes from the back side. And I'm going to do that because it'll be easier for you to see. But the buttonholes won't look as good as if you sew them from the right side of the garment. But these buttonholes aren't going to show very much because they're in a drawstring and a gathered waist. Okay. So, let me find some. This is literally all you need. Just need a little bit of interfacing. So I'm just cutting these little 1.5 by 2 inch pieces of interfacing. Then I've got to identify the front of my pants. And sometimes it's not that obvious. But if you grab the place where all 4 seams meet, or the fronts and the backs of both pieces, and you pinch that, grab that crotch, the back is going to be a longer seam because again it's traveling over more of the body. So that means I'm going to iron these interfacing pieces. Again, we're marking the buttonhole an inch from the top an inch from that center seam, and then 1 3/4 inches from the top. Does not have to be perfect. So I'm just going to put them there and go take them over and iron them. You definitely, most all of the time, want to interface where buttonholes go. There are times it's not necessary, but the times that you didn't do it and you should have really suck. So I'm pressing that. I opened the door for you to come in this way. No! That's my iron. I'm streaming though. My husband just accused me of smoking. Okay, which I used to smoke, but I haven't smoked in years.
Yeah, now I can smoke. It's like
So
like
you went from accusing me of smoking to accusing me of vaping. It's just getting worse. Like, no, I'm not having an affair either. All right. Are you done? You need anything else out there?
no.
Okay, so I'm just pressing. What? You do need some? Oh, you're closing all the way?
Yep.
I'm just pressing these interfacings really tight. So let me show you. It's hard to see, but they're right there. Center front, okay? And then I'm going to draw my buttonholes on here. And I'll go ahead and use, so here, yeah, you can see that pretty well there. So again, it's 1 3/4 from the top and 1 inch from the center. I'm going to mark my 1 inch from the center first. And then I'll mark my 1 3/4 inch from the top. And how long do you make the buttonholes? Well, it doesn't matter. Okay. So I've got my interfacing, you know, wasn't spaced great, but it doesn't matter. So there's my buttonholes. And I'm going to show you how to make a buttonhole. Super easy. But I will also say, again, you wouldn't want to use what I'm about to show you to make a highly visible buttonhole. This is like a cheater buttonhole. Okay. So there we go. First, I'm going to have a ginger candy. Oh my gosh. Okay. Most buttonholes benefit by sewing with a piece of paper underneath them. It's a good habit to get into. You can use stabilizers and all sorts of other things, but paper works really well. Okay. First thing we're going to do is sew a straight stitch all the way around this buttonhole space. So, about a 1/16 of an inch away from that center line, I'm going to do a straight stitch. We're just going to sew a rectangle. Shorten your stitch really short, 1 millimeter. And like I said, a 1/16 of an inch, right down to that second mark. Needle down, swivel your machine. Swivel your machine. We're just sewing a rectangle. Doesn't have to be perfect. I'm closing the rectangle. Okay, so oops. Now we're at the top of the rectangle, and you can see, you'll be able to see your little rectangle right there. All right, I'm going to take it off and show it to you. Normally we just keep continuing, but you guys can't see what I can see. This is cool because the back side of the paper kind of helps you see. There's that rectangle that I've sewn. The rectangle is perfectly oriented. The paper with lines is not. So you can kind of see. There you go. So now I'm going to go ahead and switch to a zigzag stitch. And this one you'll have a pretty narrow 1 inch, and let's go with a length of 0.4. This is a super tight zigzag. And you know what? This is great because it does not have to be perfect, but you want to sew right over that zigzag. If I was really cool, I would have done this in a super contrasting thread for you guys. So again, you're just sewing a rectangle, and this time with a super narrow zigzag stitch. Right over the top of that first line. And then you can go ahead, after you've closed your rectangle again, you can go ahead if you want and actually widen your zigzag to a 2 and just do one more pass. The whole idea here is that you don't have, you know, a buttonhole that tears open. So it's making it super strong. So you're basically sewing 3 rectangles, a really short straight stitch rectangle, then a short, very narrow zigzag rectangle, and then a 2 mm wide rectangle. And mine would probably look better if I hadn't been yapping, but yeah, you can see it looks pretty good actually. It does look better on the side you sew from. So all that means is that you can sew from the top side. Just make sure that you're catching, that you've oriented it properly. See, look. Is this buttonhole good enough for the front of a silk blouse? No. Is it good enough for my PJs? Yes. Will anyone see that buttonhole? Not really, but you definitely want it to be sturdy because I have a pair where the buttonhole is torn out from the drawstring and it sucks. Oh, Tim wants a 0.6 zigzag. That's too hardcore. That can't be done. Okay, so now I'm going to do the other one. So now I want to go back to my straight stitch, go back to a 1 mm length, go ahead and stick my paper scrap underneath. Go ahead and again, you're right where that line is that you drew your buttonhole, you are just like a 1/16 of an inch to the right of that. Then you leave your needle down and pivot. Honestly, these are so easy and fun. Like you probably could get with, you know, if you're really focusing, you could get ones that look so good that you could just put them on a shirt. Anyone who's a follower of mine knows that I use my old Singer for, what did I say? What was that? It was 1 wide and 0.4 long. I'm not doing 0.6. That's just not okay. Yeah, I use my old Singer buttonholer, which is like from 1950. It makes really consistent, great buttonholes. One day, I'm gonna have an industrial buttonholer for my jeans. This buttonhole that I'm showing you today, though, is good. It will hold up. And I'm going to show you 2 ways to cut it open, but we're not doing that yet. Okay, so again, this is where I widen the zigzag for the last pass to my 2. By the way, I have the cool... In my Singer buttonholer, I have this really cool eyelet plate that I bought, and it makes a perfectly round eyelet, which would be perfect for this, but I don't have that. I don't have a camera on it. All right, there we go. We're all done. That buttonhole looks pretty good, actually. But you'll notice they're both the same size. They're both very sturdy. They're equally spaced. Okay, so we're all done with buttonholes. And we're told not to open them yet, so I'm not sure why. It's probably an obvious reason why, but I don't know what it is. Okay, so let me go back to the instructions. So we've already made our elastic. Here's my elastic. I'm going to overlap and stitch it together. Wait, am I? No, I'm going down the casing method here on page 21. So I'm going to fold a 1/4 inch and press, and then an 1.5 inches and press. So I'm basically pressing the casing. And yeah, it's going to take a minute actually. So let me show you what I'm doing. So basically, here's my little, this is a side seam here. I'm going to fold it down 1/4 inch. And then I'm going to fold it another inch, did it say 1.5 inches? This is a good time to have a gauge or something to measure. I'm going to pin the hell out of that. Okay, this is where the way I would do it and the way the pattern would do it, I need to pay some attention here. Okay, this has you. Oh, great. I now I need to like slow down and read. Okay. This has you basically stitching the casing almost all the way together and then threading the elastic. And yeah, we're gonna do it that way. We'll do it the pattern way. So let me get my gauge. And you know, take your time because this seam, it does kind of matter how it looks. Okay, here's my 1.5 inches. So that means that after I fold that down, I fold it even more. So the total amount of folding you're doing is 1.75 inches. Okay. So I'm just gonna start pinning that. This is not how I would do the top. But it's fine. It's just not how I would do it. This is a cut-on waistband. What that means is the waistband is part of the top and the the front and the back pieces. So there you go. I'm just folding, 1.5 inches and then 1/4, just like instructed. So it takes a few minutes to get that all done. For me, I think it yields a better result to do a separate waistband. But like you're seeing that right here because you've got this sort of excess fabric here. So just do your best. Your best. Like Sean Connery in The Rock. Losers do their best. That's me. Okay. I can't believe Ralph was accusing me of just like being down here smoking. Yeah, this just isn't like the funnest part of the project. Okay, so but you do want a fair number of pins in here because it will make it look better at the end. I'm getting there. I don't know. Just gonna do this. And then, your exacting marking and cutting will you'll see how well you did because you don't want your buttonholes somewhere weird, which mine are. So I don't know. This is annoying. Yeah, I'm officially annoyed with this method. The buttonholes are too high. Like, I either read that wrong or it's not an excellent method. But that's okay. Just keep pinning. Just keep pinning. Okay, we're getting there. And once we have that pinned, See, my advice is to start stitching because you're going to leave a gap to thread. So my first advice is to, for the love of God, open up those buttonholes. I don't know why we haven't done that yet. So I'm going to open them up the way I've done it before I got a buttonhole chisel. And that is, you use a seam ripper and you carefully stab right in there. Be very careful not to cut through the buttonhole or you have negated the purpose of the buttonhole. Now, a buttonhole chisel is this amazing tool. I have it over here, but I don't think many people watching have one. But I'll demonstrate it. I'll show you what it looks like. So there, I've opened my buttonholes. I'm going to go ahead and pin that elastic facing back down. Okay, so annoying. Like, this is annoying. I'll probably modify my actual pattern, the one that fits me, to my preferred method here. But okay, so let me show you the buttonhole chisel before I move on. This is the buttonhole chisel. You literally nestle that little tip right into your buttonhole and just press firmly onto like a block of wood. This is my awl, ignore the awl. And it weirdly makes just like amazing buttonholes, but this is good enough. Okay, so now what I would recommend that you do, it's time to stitch it. We're not stitching it all the way closed. I would recommend that you start somewhere in the back and you start where there's like a little strip that's the same color as your thread because you're going to overlap your thread right there. And so that way it'll be hidden. Like, again, just way too exacting. Nobody cares as much as I do about this stuff. And, you know, I would use like a slightly longer, I've got a 3mm stitch. And the pattern is like, oh, you know, there's going to be some rumples in it. Yeah, there is, because again, it's a cut-on waistband and a fairly deep one at that. And that's why I would use a separate waistband, but we're just going to live with it. We're going to live with our choices. And, you know, I've covered this before, but obviously don't sew over pins. It actually, this is a very nice looking inner seam here. The first pair I made, I didn't do a drawstring, and I did the waistband that is just elastic, and I think this looks better. So here I am just traveling. This, you know what, this is funny because this is the way I first learned how to make a waistband, was where you stitch it, you double fold it, and you stitch it most of the way closed, and then you thread the elastic. There are some liabilities to that method, but it's like the traditional method. And don't accidentally stitch your waistband closed. Like, notice where you ended it. You don't actually have to backstitch because you're going to stitch again, but I just out of habit. Okay. If you like, you can press that top edge, and I am going to do that. See, there's my top edges. Just going to make it a little crisper by pressing it. So actually we're getting really close to being finished. I really am going to climb on my table just to kind of demonstrate hemming. All right, that's looking nice and crisp. See? Okay, so now it's time to thread your elastic. So because we're doing this casing method, we haven't joined the elastic together yet at the short end. Let me do this over here. Okay. So I take a big, huge safety pin, or the biggest one I have, and I go ahead and find my loose end here. And this won't take nearly as long as turning the drawstring right side out. That was a nightmare. You were with me there. You stuck with it. The bigger the safety pin, the easier this will go in, by the way. The thing that sucks about this, it's really hard not to get the elastic twisted when you do this method. And I've tried like to be so careful in how I fed it and all of these things, and still like stitched it all back up, and boom, there was a twist in the elastic, which is so annoying. So when we put our drawstring in, it's going to be basically the same premise, using a safety pin. So the more that we thread it, the more gathered the top looks, and you risk losing the end inside the casing. This is such a large casing, a large elastic, it's no big deal. But there are some projects where you would not want that to happen. Man, I'm looking right across at like other flannels I have and thinking about how much I loved making the kids flannel pajamas. They just don't like seem to need my sewing as much anymore. Okay, so here we go. I've come out the other side, and now this is the part where we try not to twist the elastic. So the best way I've found to do this is to actually pin. So here's my elastic came out. So go ahead and flatten it and pin it super flat. And then we're just gonna continue to sort of trace it with our fingers and pin it flat. I'm serious, you guys. It's so hard not to like somehow twist this stuff. It's easier if the elastic has a significantly larger casing. See, like there's a twist in here, but I've caught it. Like catching it is the point. Okay, so I think that that's flat. So then I'm going to take it and pin it with my safety pin here. This is emulating my stitching that I'm going to be doing. And then I'm going to take out these little pins that I made and just going to run my fingers. Nope, I'm suspicious. No, I think it's fine. It's kind of, you know, these little twists could hide in these little gathers, yeah. But I think I've got it. So now I'm just going to join my elastics. It says to overlap 3/8 of an inch. The one advantage to this method is like you could try on your elastic really easily and make sure that you like how it feels, and then finally stitch the casing closed. That is a nice advantage of this method. So I'm just overlapping and stitching like the pattern suggests. All right, and then I'm checking and finding a twist. No, just kidding. Wait. my god, I really do think I have a twist. This is what I'm talking about, bitch. It's so easy to have one. Alright, back to my pinning. So, you know, real time, real drama. Yeah, there's literally, well, no. I think I've got like a double twist. It's nice. Okay, no, I don't. I don't have a twist at all. It's in my parent. All right. I mean, if you have a friend who can stretch it out for you, that's another way to check. Yeah, all right, it's fine. Sorry, I got paranoid. All right, so then we're just gonna finish that little gap right there. Just gonna finish that. Easy peasy. Okay, now we can thread in our drawstring, and then we're doing our hems and we're finished. Can you believe it? So, you know, that's pretty good looking in there. I'm always kind of amazed at how good looking my stuff is, even when I'm like really tired. Got a lot going on. Trying to explain it while I sew it. Ginger candy. All right. Okay. Let's put that, where did I put that little safety pin, huh? Okay. Trying to do this on camera. Again, the bigger the safety pin, the better. Within reason. Oh, and by the way, before we continue, this pattern suggests that you kind of distribute your elastic and then stitch it to the sides, and that's actually a great idea. It kind of helps the elastic stay where it needs to stay. Nice, okay, so we've got one side, so I like the back to have more gathering and the front to be a little flatter. So I just kind of arrange it that way. This, I actually love this idea that, or this method. I don't always employ it. And so you just stitch right in that. Woo! You stitch right in the ditch and it's not visible. It's probably visible from the other side. You can either, well, there's a lot of things you can do about that. You can stitch just like slightly. Oh no, you guys, I can't do that yet. I'm sorry. Guess why? Because I haven't threaded the drawstring through there. So I want to release just a couple of those stitches so I can thread the drawstring through there. So actually, you definitely don't want to stitch the drawstring down at all. So if you're going to do that method, just do what I'm doing and only stitch part way up. and then thread your drawstring right through there. Thread your drawstring right through there. I think that this side stitching must be an idea of when you don't have a drawstring at all, but it will work and it is a good idea. You just can't do it all the way up. And of course I did such a great job that it's like hard to take the stitches out. Ralph's making our dinner right now. Okay, great. There we go. So, make sure you have enough of a space. Yep. And I'll go on this side. Actually, this is great. Now I have a kind of a method to like stitch it halfway and then thread that drawstring in. Kind of cool. So while I'm sitting here dicking around with these tiny stitches, I get to go to a rescue sanctuary here this weekend with my family, which is pretty cool. All these little barnyard critters that don't have to be exploited and that get to live out their natural lives with proper care. Okay, so here I go. So this is going to be a cinch. So I'm pushing my safety pin through. And be careful because you can actually, a big safety pin, sometimes you can actually undo it inside and stab yourself. And it can be a little tricky to get past the side seams. How cute is this drawstring though, with my little dinosaurs? It's cute. And after this, I gotta take off my clothes down here. And because you know what, I don't want to hem these twice. I want to hem them once. I want to get the right length. I'm almost all the way around with my drawstring. All right, there we go. Now you remember I made kind of a very long drawstring, and that's fine. I don't want to cut it yet. I want to try it on. The pattern has you doing, oh, look at that, you guys. That looks great. The pattern has you doing a drawstring that's 24 inches than your low hip measurement, 24 inches longer. That's probably just great, but I'm gonna just check. Okay, you guys. There we go. Whoops. Look at that. Okay. So, I'm just down here gonna take my pants off. I probably would have worn easier boots had I known. I'd have to pull them off today. But you know what? I absolutely do care about my hem length because I do not like high water pants. I have a complicated pants scene because for jeans I need the crop length, like I'm obsessed with them. But these aren't jeans. Here come the socks. Oh, all right. Try these little homies on. Oh, they fit perfect. All right, let's see if this works. Here is me. Up. There we go. It worked. So I feel like yeah. So I'm gonna take a total of 1.5 inches off of these. Actually, a little bit less because these are gonna shrink a tiny bit more. So, but you're gonna want to stand up and check that out. And if you're working with flannel, unless you've pre-washed it and dried it like 8 times, here I come climbing back down. Yeah, you're going to want to give yourself some more shrinkage. So I'm going to take these up 1.25 inches together. And actually the drawstring, it's good. Nice. These actually feel great. Okay. All right. Let me put my clothes back on. Guys, we're almost done. So I kind of think, like if I'm 5'5" and these pants, this size medium, only allowed for 1.25 inches hem allowance. I kind of think if you're a little taller and if you're a little bigger. Oh, hang on. I'm going to have to pause for a minute. I got someone at the door early, which is sort of not cool. I'll be right back. Okay, I am so sorry about that. I had a client show up like a half hour early, and you know, people showing up early, people showing up late, kind of a pain. Okay. All right, so we are, I'm just going to press up my hem, okay, 1.25 inches to the wrong side over at the ironing board. Okay. So I am just pressing the full hem allowance up. So because I want a shorter hem of by 1.25, that's how much I'm pressing up. Nice little crisp crease in here. And then we are just moments away from being all finished. Okay, so there we go. And this is kind of just a classic double hem. I'm going to start from the inseam because that's just kind of what I always do, and that's kind of my habit. But I fold the raw edge right down to that pressed crease, and then okay. Now, you can pin this. If you're new, I recommend that you press and then pin it. Okay, so go over to your machine and really press that second crease. But I don't need to do that. Just remember, as you sew and remove your pins or do what I'm doing and just fold and sew as you go, leave your needle down every time you shift your fabric, or else you're going to have an ugly skip stitch. And I'm just stitching like 1/8 of an inch away from that top folded edge. Okay, got these little bits to trim here. Okay, so that's my one hem all finished, and I'm gonna go press it, but it already looks crisp. Same thing on the other side. And again, I start with the inseam, not because of, there's somewhat of a reason. That's where this seam will overlap on itself, and it's not a very visible place. But also, it's just, like I said, like a convention that I have. And by the way, my sharp needle, I can tell by the noise it's making that it is dull as heck. It's been used too much, so this is its last hurrah. Okay. that nice open seam in there. That looks really good. So tomorrow I'll post some good, well-lit pictures of all of these details that we worked on. And there we go. So carefully snip. And like I said, I'm just going to go press that hem one more time. Okay, we are all finished. Let's just move this. There we go. So we have our pockets here. We have our drawstring. We have our super beautiful hem. We have a great looking waistband casing and some excellent looking super trim pockets. This was, besides the interruption this evening, this worked out pretty good. Again, the pattern link and then this class link will be on my blog post. You can find the materials list for all of this series on the first day of the month. And remember, next week or next month we are making a t-shirt. So the t-shirt won't take quite as long as the PJ pants, but they're kind of similar in terms of difficulty. So thank you guys so much. Thank you for your patience, especially with our interruption. And I will be seeing you guys next month.